Nathan Law, thank you very much for being on the programme. It's good to speak to you. Tell us first of all about your exile here in London. Why you've had to come here.
So in last June, when we all had a certain idea of how the national security law looked like, I decided to leave the city because it is the only way that I can speak freely and continue the international advocacy work. So under the national security law, there had been more than 100 arrests, and a lot of them are just speech crime. When people chant certain slogan, bringing up certain political ideas, they are arrested. So I think if I were stay in Hong Kong, then I would be submitted to that restriction or intimidation. So I decided to leave.
Can I ask you how you were able to get out of the country? Because, of course, you've been in prison before and you've been picked up by the Chinese before. How were you able to escape?
So I was a legislator in Hong Kong and was a political prisoner. But at that time, I was lucky that I didn't have any charge being put on me. My passport is not confiscated. And other democratic campaigners are not as lucky as I, because they had been arrested, their passport being confiscated. They are not allowed to leave the city. My friend Joshua Wong, Anna Chow, and many others share this situation. So that was the reason why I can leave and carry the responsibility to represent Hong Kong people, the democratic movement, and the voice of Hong Kong on the international level.
You are wanted by the Chinese Communist Party. I wonder how you have found your life in London as a result of both your exile and the fact that you are wanted. Do you have much greater security now than you did in Hong Kong, or do you feel like there is still some people watching or some people waiting for you to slip up?
Well, it's impossible, I think, for the UK government to make a compromise with the Chinese government in terms of like extraditing me or sending me back to mainland China. So in that regards, I'm safer than in Hong Kong. But we all understand how extensive and far-reaching the influence of the Chinese Communist Party is. So I dare not to say I'm completely safe. They have extra legal means to persecute people that they don't like. So for now, I'm still living in a very cautious way and continue to voice for Hong Kong.
How on earth, particularly given that the protests, as you said, that this anniversary we're coming up to, I believe I'm told that the protests aren't actually going to be able to happen this year. How are people with the views that you hold going to be able to make any change in the city of Hong Kong to try and undo some of the laws that the Chinese Communist Party have put in?
Well, undoubtedly, the short-term future of Hong Kong is grim. We're not blindly optimistic about the ability for change in Hong Kong. But I think for now, people still have a huge persistence and tenacity in countering those threats. Even though we cannot protest on the street, we cannot have assembly or rally, as these are all banned by the Hong Kong government. But if you take a look at Apple Daily's incident, even though it was a tragedy, a listed company being forced to close in a matter of days without procedural justice, the company's representative and the executive are not even given a chance to defend themselves on the court. But you could really see how people support them, even though they're in a very difficult situation. As you said, on the very last day of their publication, the printed copies for a million copies, they were all sold. People still support them in that fashion. So there are still certain potential ways of expressing discontent in the city, but it's just not as visible as before.
So the feeling is still there, but the methods to display those feelings perhaps limited as a result of those law changes. Just finally, Nathan, and it's been great to have you on the programme. I'd love to get you on again at some stage and talk more about this, because it's part of a wider trend, I'm afraid, of the Chinese Communist Party. I wonder what your view is regarding the lab leak theory. I don't know whether you've been able to take a look at it, or what your views would be of the idea that the Chinese Communist Party have moved heaven and earth to cover up the fact that the coronavirus escaped accidentally from the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Well, I think the most important thing is we have to hold Chinese Communist Party accountable and to ask them not to intervene in independent investigation. We have heard the lab leak theory and many others, but the point is there is no way to verify them if the Chinese Communist Party is not allowing an independent research group and to do the investigation. So it is really an open-ended question, but what comes first is we need to apply pressure for an open and an unbiased investigation before we make the final conclusion of it. And the Chinese Communist Party has to step away from the intervention to these investigations.
Very good to speak to you. Nathan Law, pro-democracy Hong Kong activist, exiled now in London. Really good to see you. Thank you very much indeed for your time.